First of all, I want to just welcome everyone to a new feature showcase for Kuali Budget. We're here to hopefully answer questions you may have on where we are with the new app. But first, just to cover what we're going to be covering today, we'll do some initial introductions and some background information on the project. And then we'll go really through a working demonstration. And finally, we'll leave some time for Q&A at the end. Now, I did want to ask that the way that we're going to do some Q&A is if you could just post questions in Zoom, and then we'll, time permitting, we'll try to get to as many questions as we can at the end. So for those of you that aren't familiar with me, I'm new to the research team. My name is Dennis Kapoyas. I'm the Senior Product Manager for Kuali. I've actually been with Kuali for 1 year. I actually started about a week before last year's Kuali Days, so this is technically my second Kuali Days. I'm the former product manager for Kuali Financials, but I moved to the research team at the beginning of this year. Really quick background on me, my entire career has been in internet-based software. The last 10 years, I've been mostly in ed tech, and higher ed in particular. I was a product manager for a financial aid software system, but also had a brief stint for an early childhood company before joining Kuali last year. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Mark Oliver, our senior product designer. Mark, if you're going to say a few words.
Thanks, Dennis. Yeah, my name is Mark Oliver, and I've been with Kuali just over a year, and I know many of the folks on the call here. I've been working on several products, one of which is Budget, which will hopefully show you shortly, a little demo of that. And in the picture, I'm the person wearing the gray jacket, but the rest of the people are my family. So, welcome.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, so I know that many of you are new to the research. As if you were at the keynote, Casey mentioned a bunch of new customers. So I wanted to spend a little time just kind of looking back to this time last year. I want to do a quick reminder of why we decided to take on this project and what we're really trying to accomplish with the new Budget app. First, we recognize that there's lots of problems with the current budget tool. Mainly, that it's cumbersome. It takes a long time to build a budget. Sometimes hard to understand what the calculations are doing. Really, just too many screens and clicks are involved in building a budget. And because of this, and from what the data is telling us, many of you are not actually using the tool at all, or those of you that are just using some very limited features. And that was really the main reason we decided a year ago to really redesign the budget. And our main goal really is to deliver a reimagined tool that makes it simple and fast enough for a casual user to generate a budget, but at the same time supporting the more complex needs of contract budgeting. So that's really the balance we're trying to find. And in order to do that, we are really focused on 4 primary design objectives in order to meet that goal. First, really around efficacy, or the efficiency that it takes to do budgets. We want to make it easier. We want to make it faster for you to build budgets. We want to improve on collaboration. Really, we understand that the budget process involves many departments. And we want to make it easier for others to participate in the process, but at the same time, making sure that there's controls in place so that only certain people can do changes on things and others can do approvals and things like that. And the third point, really, this concept of iterative budgeting. We really want to make sure that there's really still just one budget that's attached to a proposal, but that it has the full history of changes that you can see what happened to that budget over time. so that you don't have to resort to making multiple budgets or budget versions or budget drafts, which I think we've seen again in a lot of the way that you are currently using, those that are using the budget tool. And finally, we want to improve your confidence in the budget. Make these calculations, make all the calculations a little more transparent and real time with better information context so that you can be more confident in the accuracy of the actual calculations. So really quickly, when is it coming? So this diagram here that I'm showing you is not so much of a feature roadmap or schedule as it is what we kind of consider more of a priority roadmap. Right now, we are really in this first phase of building the simple budget. And that really is around making sure the basic fields are in place and calculations. It does include cost sharing, which we'll talk a little bit later in the session. And some limited tools that would make the management of the budgets easier than the previous version. And also, a lot of the back end work really needed to be done in order for us to even start building the simple budget. Interoperability is really our next focus. That'll be more of the second half of this year, and that's really just how the existing budget works with the new budget, how the current configuration options work with the new budget. And as we kind of get more towards the right half of the diagram, we'll start building, more of the complex features of budgeting around formulated cost, sub-award translation and under recovery calculations. And then sort of the further out it gets to the right, becomes a little bit fuzzier as to what types of things we'll be working on. But in a nutshell, we'll be looking at things to improve collaboration, as well as maybe revisiting some of the way budgets are configured in the system right now. But I kind of caution looking at this as necessarily a schedule, as it's really a priority roadmap, because there'll be several things that we may work on around interoperability that we need to start working on now, as an example. In fact, that is the case because in order for us to actually, have the budget working, we needed to actually make sure that it worked with existing configuration data. But I hope that this gives you a little bit of the sense of how we're approaching it. But as with software, sometimes these things can be hard to predict, and we'll leave some room for us to be able to pivot as we start to release our first version of the simple budget and get more feedback from you as to what's working and what's not. So with that, I did want to mention a couple of near-term milestones that I think are relevant for our discussion. The first is that we're going to be showing you, we're going to show you where the simple budget is at this point. Over the next couple of months, we intend to get these out into your sandbox environments so that you can really touch and feel what this new budget app is like, as well as to engage with you and get more feedback and help us in the design process. And then the other thing that I want to mention is that the next big piece that we're working on now is around cost sharing, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But we would also like to take advantage of this time here as we're all together in Kuali days to ask some of you to help us to meet us in the R&D lab, which we'll talk about a little bit more, or ask questions why we have this opportunity to participate in the design of this new feature. Okay, going to take a quick pause. So I'm going to turn it over to Mark. He's going to talk about what our progress has been up to this date and some of the things that we've learned over the last year.
Thanks, Dennis. I'll just go ahead and share my screen. Okay. All right. So, yeah, in a few minutes, I'm going to show the front end. So we're really excited to show the progress with regards to that. Before we jump in, I do want to just talk a little bit about kind of what we've been doing during the year, some of the findings and things like that. As Dennis mentioned, you know, we're looking to you guys on the phone, on Zoom, wherever you are, just to help us improve the design as we move forward. So we're asking folks to sign up for the next study for cost sharing that's coming up. We'll give you some more information on that in a second. And then also, as Dennis mentioned, the R&D labs that are happening throughout the week. So the advantage is you'll be able to see the design up close if you come to those labs. We're just going to do a quick overview today, but and then obviously come in and just share those features that are important to you, and ultimately help shape a future product that you may be using fairly soon. Okay, so so let's see here. I'm going to move forward to the next slide. We'll talk a little bit about, as I mentioned, what we've been doing. I'll go into the demo, and then we'll talk a little bit about moving forward after that. So far we've done around 40 interviews with folks. We built 5 prototypes, and then, as I mentioned, there's a new front-end design. It's a work in progress, but nonetheless, we're excited to show that to you in a moment. I just want to reiterate, if you got any questions, then just if you could go through Zoom or at the R&D labs later, that'd be great. Okay, so summary of findings. Let's see. Okay, so a few of the things that we found are, we've got we've been looking at the structure. There's a common thing in the structure, so we can see that there's a budget name, years, things like that, that we found speaking to people. So we're looking to kind of copy that. In one of the tests, we saw that there was, when we tested 9 people, one of the things we found is that folks were using Excel quite a lot, even though they had access to Kuali days. So there's some things around that I want to touch on, how we can be a little bit more Excel-like. Dennis talked a little bit about this. So the navigation compared to looking at one page, but how can we help folks instead of going back and forth to a lot of pages, how can they jump to just have one view? And also what we found in some of the interviews were, folks were just wanting to attach and print, simple things like that. So how can we help folks do that more easily? And then some other things we found were around user control, speaking to folks that, they needed to be able to essentially, create, when they created a budget, having people go in and kind of change those numbers. They're worried about that. Is there anything they can do with regard to permissions? And then lastly, I just wanted to touch on, Dennis mentioned this, there's a lot of clicking backwards and forwards, a lot of dialogues today. What can we do in the future to kind of address that? Again, this relates back to the navigation. How can we reduce the fact that they are jumping from one part of the product to another and going through several screens just to see a budget change or a rate change? How can we kind of help folks with that? Okay, so all right, so let's see here. So we're going to go into the demo. So fingers crossed. All right, so so we're looking at a demo page here. Hopefully everyone can see that. I'm just going to walk through the overall design before I kind of dig in too much, kind of on the individual items, but the general structure, as I showed you earlier, you know, we have a kind of a page title at the top. We've got the periods or years underneath that. On the left side, we've got the expenses. In the middle, we have, you know, all the dollar amounts and so on. And then in general, folks were, you know, setting up their budgets to see totals or subtotals at the bottom and on the right-hand side. So that's kind of the general layout of the page. It's also has a little bit more Excel-like feel to it, and I'll talk about that in a minute. There's some quick inline editing you can do, which you couldn't do before. You know, as you can see here, everything's on one page. I mean, there will be dialogues, there will be other kind of modes you can go into, but generally there's no real navigating. We're trying to take the notion of the left-hand navigation out, so you can just stay on this one page, get this kind of one view to your budget. And then this right contextual panel that I'll talk about in a little bit shows you kind of what you're focused on. So if you're focused on a certain part of the budget, that panel follows you around and gives you more information on that particular item that you're looking at. So let's see. So I'm going to just, for a moment here, I'm just going to talk about the toolbar. Right now, we just have 3 or 4 actions. There are 2 showing here, and then a couple in this more menu, or we should call the more menu. This toolbar is going to grow as we add more actions. But right now, one of the things you can do there is expand and collapse the entire budget. So the nice thing about this is you get almost, if you completely collapse it, like you can see here, you get almost a summary view. So folks or faculty who are just interested in that top level view of the category groups, they can see that there. And then if you want to expand that out, you can kind of, obviously this page could get fairly long if you have a lot of expenses in that left side, but that gives you flexibility as to how you, when you're using this, how you want to view it. Do you want to view everything at the same time or bit by bit? And then if you want to pick one particular area like senior personnel and you just want to dig into that, you can just open that up with this arrow here on the left side, and you can kind of focus in on one particular area if you want. So there's a few different ways you can kind of use the UI in that sense. You can also, let's see here, you can also delete rows pretty simply, just removing people out like that. Hopefully everybody saw that. And then in this more menu, we'll have several kind of functions in here, but a couple of that we have right now are add a period and delete a period. So let's see. So if I wanted to, what I'm going to do here is add a period. So you can, I'll just close out of that for a second. You can see there's 4 periods here, for example. Wanted to add a period. We can see the 5th one drops in there as the last column. And then if you wanted to remove that, you can go in and just delete any of those periods. Let's just remove period 5. One of the other things I wanted to show, and again, there's quite a few areas of this, I'm just going to touch on a few of them, but is the periods area. If I open up this this row, we can see there's dates associated with each period. And so the idea here is that you know, one of the things we found in the tool that's there right now is that there isn't much flexibility with regards to period dates, being able to change those and things like that. So what you can do now is you can actually click right there in line, and you can adjust that period date, the beginning and the end date. And once you do that, the numbers kind of add up. Well, they're all 0 right now because we're in a test budget, but they would be reflected down this period 1 column, an update there. So a lot more flexibility with regards to changing the period dates, which I think is important. I'm going to talk a little bit about personnel now, senior personnel. The idea is that you know, folks will come in from the proposal into the budget automatically, and then you can delete them out of that if you want. But let's go ahead and add a senior personnel here. And as you can see, the UI in general is fairly clean. What we're introducing here is the notion of, you know, hovering in certain areas and being able to add people inline. So again, back to that inline editing, somewhat similar to Excel in the sense that you can do this inline editing, but with some extra functionality. So as you can see here, I click this plus. We got a row that came in here. And then you can either just start typing straight away, or you can kind of click into this list and you'll get all the results from the database from employees from your institution. And then once you start typing, or you can pick somebody here from the list. And then in order to add them, we just get requesting 2 pieces of information regarding object code and appointment type. And once those are set, you'll be able to see on the right-hand column here, this right-hand panel, which we're calling contextual panel, will start to give you some information around, in this case, Lloyd's, you know, salary effective date, base salary, appointment type, and so on. So if I click to other people here in line, we can see that their details change as we go through there. Okay, so one of the nice things about senior personnel as well, if I expand out, we can see fringe right there in line associated. We can also see requested salary right there. So I'm just going to go ahead and type in a salary. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So let's see. We will also have rates coming into this right-hand column. I'm going to try and grab someone who I think has that already in there. You don't happen to know, Joe, if we have someone who has, is it Althea? Let's see if we can get this in here. Okay. So you can see.
Just go ahead and put a base salary in there, Mark, on the right side.
Oh, okay.
You can manually get it in there for now.
Okay. Great, thanks. So when I did that and I hit enter, hopefully folks could see that a few different things happened. If I scroll down a little bit here, you'll see the rates come in. So any rates that you have associated with your institution that have been set up to show will show there. You can of course turn those on and off. And if I wanted to go into any one of these individual cells to override anything, I could go ahead and do that. And once you do that, if you're overriding any institutional value, what we're doing, and some folks will have seen this on the modular budget and other areas, today we'll show this kind of you know, blue triangle, and that'll just indicate that you're overriding the institutional either rates or salary and that kind of thing that's been coming through. So so if people come back in, they can see if they've made changes in certain areas and that kind of thing. Let's see. Okay, we're also introducing some tooltips around here. So we do have a help section that folks are aware of, but we're going to also be showing tooltips kind of inline on hover, just to give people more information about the particular rates and things like that, without having to go to a completely different page and go through a help section. And one of the other things I'll note before we come back out of here is ADA. We've been doing a lot of work around ADA compliancy. So looking at how this works. If you're not using a mouse, how you can tab through it, and have been testing this with screen readers as well. So again, this is a work in progress, but we're looking to kind of improve the ADA as well as we move through here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just minimize this for a second and talk a little bit more just about the right column. So again, we talked about rates. We're thinking of adding cost sharing here, but I'd love to speak to everyone about cost sharing if they're free. At the top here, I just wanted to point out a couple of different things. We have the notion of a limit, the budget limit. You can see how much is remaining. And then pretty clearly, we've got the total budget amount here that's always showing. So these three elements will follow you around. So you don't, I think today, you have to go back and you have to open up another page and get somewhere else to see any kind of totals and things like that. So this is something that will follow you around. And then the last thing I'll say, if you want to get back to the proposal that you came in from, you can get back in the top left here via that link at any time. All right, I'm going to I'm going to jump out of the demo now and just get back into the presentation. Okay. So, as I was mentioning earlier, we still have a way to go with regards to all of this. We still need to make plenty of improvements, and what you saw there was a partially finished front end. And I do want to point out that the credit really does go to the team for that. We've been working with engineers, Sean, Joe, Doug, and Drew. So they really have been doing a fantastic job with all of this. But again, it is work in progress, and all of this that you've been seeing is really all based off of user feedback that we've been gathering so far. So yeah, in spite of that, we have had certainly some positive feedback so far, and I'm not going to read through all of these, but generally people are feeling, it looks like people are feeling that, it's easy to kind of maneuver and get around, navigate through, which is great. Being able to see all the periods together. People who use Kuali budget today, you're kind of seeing one period at a time, and then you got to come back out and that kind of thing, so you can see everything together. So that's great. The totals that I talked about earlier, being able to make those stand out. And it sounds like the categories are making sense to people, which is great. Also, we can see that as I talked about with senior personnel, we've got fringe right there in line. So you can see that right next to that person's name. And generally, it's kind of that one-page view. Sounds like people are understanding that, and they like that experience. So far, so good. But again, there'll be plenty of improvements we'll need to do as we move through this and gather more feedback and things like that. Okay, so let's see here. So I'm just going to very quickly touch on a couple of different things that are coming up. So one thing that Dennis touched on a little bit at the beginning, versioning. We have this notion, so this is just a sketch right here, what I'm displaying, but one of the things we're looking at is version history. So this isn't finished or anything, but the idea here is that panel that we talked about earlier, the contextual panel on the right-hand side. You'll be able to, once you activate the history, the idea is that you'll be able to see the current version that you're in right at the top. And then with date stamps below that, you'll be able to see when any changes had been made. So for example, in this, what we're looking at here is on August 14th, there were several changes made. We can see who made the change. So in this case, it was Judith. And we can see that she actually increased the sub award to 14,800, I think it is. So we'll also show inline. The idea is we'll show inline corresponding kind of where that change had been made on the actual UI. And there may be several actions you can do with regards to versioning or history. One of them may be to restore that older version, or rename it or something like that. So there's some things we're kind of starting to look at. We're also looking at cost sharing. I don't have a screen here, but I will have some screens potentially to look at in the R&D lab. So, we'd love for people on the Zoom, if they have time to come to the R&D lab and get involved. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But basically, for cost sharing, the main focus will be after Kuali days. We'll do another set of interviews. So get in contact with me directly at this address at the bottom if you're interested in getting involved in that. I will talk a little bit about it in the R&D labs, but the main this call to action really is just for folks who are interested in giving feedback and talking about cost sharing in general in the coming days, in the next maybe couple of weeks or so. Let's see here. So we've so yeah, again, if you do go to the R&D labs and even these interviews, but especially the R&D labs, you'll just be able to see the design up close, a little bit more detail. And again, share the features that you feel are important. And again, help shape the future of a product that you may be using. So let's see. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing here, Dennis, and pass it back to you. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Mark. So we just got a few things left to cover here. I noticed that there's been a lot of questions that have come up in the chat, and Joe's been doing a great job trying to answer them as much as we can. I did want to talk a little bit more about ways to get involved. Mark certainly mentioned the research interviews. Even beyond the cost sharing, we plan to doing research with you all really throughout the entire process. So we definitely encourage you to continually look for opportunities to get involved in our research. And we mentioned the R&D lab that's going on this week, and Mark I think is going to be there most all of the day, I think every day. And I'll be popping in as well every day throughout the day. And then the other final thing I wanted to mention is really the sponsored programs user group meetings that we have every quarter. Would definitely encourage you to attend those as often as you can, because we do cover a lot of product updates as well as we review the roadmap. So a lot of the questions that you might have on the roadmap that we didn't necessarily go too far into today, those will usually be presented and discussed in those user group meetings. So I think that really leaves us for Q&A. I don't know if there's been any questions that we haven't been able to answer yet, but we could take a few minutes here to do that. Still have a few minutes left. If anyone wants to either post it in the chat, or I think we could even allow, just have you speak up as well if you have a question. I think Jim Becker has a question about the fonts, field labels being adjustable. So it's not necessarily an area we've looked at yet, but we would definitely like to hear a little bit more about that. Other users that might think that that's an important feature, we'd love to hear that.
Hi, this is Jim. I think on the contextual panel, some of the fields, say for the fringe benefit rates and those types of things, the text for the field label is so small it's kind of hard to read it, so that you know what you're actually looking at in the field itself. So it was primarily that area that I thought was reasonable.
Okay, well, thanks for that. Thanks for the feedback. I think we'll definitely want to explore that more. Quick question about versioning. How often will a budget be versioned? So I think, so there's a couple of things around versioning. There's this concept of actually having sort of multiple budgets to, you know, tied to a proposal. And then there's this concept of versioning in the sense more of like what you would see like in Google Docs, whereas every change is captured and that you have the ability to restore those, you know, those changes in the past, if you'd like. We'd like to move more into that sort of model, but, you know, if it becomes apparent just from talking to you all that there still may be some specific use cases and where we need to actually have multiple versions of a budget, we'll consider that for sure. I think, Joe, you also mentioned that we don't have the details of how that'll work, but those are all things that we're thinking about. There'll be a quick print email from the summary screen you were working in. So now, Mark, if you wanted to take that one.
Sure. Can talk a little bit a bit more about that specific question. Does anybody want to expand on that?
I think Aaron asked it.
I mean, the general view with regards to printing and exporting, attaching and things like that is, you know, what we've heard so far in the feedback is, you know, being able to just, you know, have this kind of one-page view, whether you're doing a screen print or whether you're actually exporting it. So it's a, you know, a document that goes over, if it's a long document, if it goes over 2 or 3 pages, you know, making sure that just looks kind of, you know, simple and clean so folks can you know, pass it and understand it. So, and we don't have that in the front end yet. But I think that one of the things that the UI does, at least what we're looking for it to do, is to, you know, not only look fairly clean without too much kind of noise, if you will, on there, or extra information. But and when folks do print, the idea would be that or export that it would be that same general look. It would be pretty clean. You just have what you needed there with regards to dates and expenses and kind of dollar amounts, and be able to print that out cleanly. But again, we haven't kind of tackled that one yet on the UI, but that's certainly the kind of the feedback we've been hearing so far, is just being able to easily kind of print that out, you know, whether you're showing someone in a meeting what the budget is, and then be able to take that back and then make your own edits in your own time. So kind of separating it from the UI, if you will, the software. But yeah, just let me know if there are other aspects of that you had questions about.
There's another question. If project dates are updated in the budget summary page, will the dates automatically be updated on the proposal? And also, will rates be updated synced based on any project date adjustments? Joe, Mark, have we thought about any of that, sort of the back and forth between proposal and budget data?
We have future work to discuss it. We just haven't dived too deeply into whether it's a bi-directional syncing or a single direction from proposal out to budget. So right now it's too early to say, but our intention is to keep the important data synchronized.
Okay, and there's a question about sending a budget from Kuali to a PI for review. This is, you know, kind of speaks more to sort of the collaboration features that we intend to do, really more kind of in the later stages. But that use case, being able to share the budget with others is definitely something that we want to be able to do, easier than how we're doing it now. Right. So I don't know if we can answer all the rest of these questions, right? Some of them probably will take us a while to kind of think through, but I would definitely encourage you all to come to the R&D lab, and if you want to pose some of the questions we didn't answer there, we could certainly can talk to you all more about it. So one final thing before we wrap up. If you could, at the end of this session, please go and rate this session. Let us know how we did. And any other feedback. I think once you do the rate now in Socio, it also gives you an opportunity to post any comments that you'd like to post. So we would appreciate, we love hearing feedback and even hearing feedback on how we did in this session. So I think we're going to wrap up. Again, I think please meet us in the R&D lab. Myself and Mark will be there, as well as and Joe will probably jump in from time to time, so we can dive into some of these questions that you have in more detail. I want to thank everybody and enjoy the rest of the conference.